My name is Eleanor Price, and at 75 years old, I thought I had seen every shade of betrayal life could paint, but nothing prepared me for the day my own son told me I had to leave my home. The mansion I had built with my late husband's sweat and sacrifice stood as a monument to our struggles, our triumphs, our family. And now, here I was, standing in the grand foyer, staring at my son, Daniel, as he held an eviction notice in his hands. His eyes, once the gentle brown of a boy who clung to my apron strings, were cold now, businesslike, as though I were nothing more than a tenant whose lease had expired. "It's for your own good, Mom," he said flatly. My heart shattered with every word, but I stood tall, clutching the railing, wondering how the child I raised could cast me aside like a stranger. I could feel the air in the house growing heavier, pressing down on me as Daniel's wife, Marissa, stood smugly behind him, her manicured hands folded neatly against her silk blouse. She didn't speak, but her smirk told me everything. She had won. For years, she treated me like clutter, like an inconvenience, and now she was reveling in my downfall. My mind raced back to nights I had walked these halls when Daniel was a boy, bandaging his scraped knees, soothing his fevers, whispering bedtime stories to calm his fears. Now, this same boy was escorting me to the door of the very house where I had poured my soul into raising him. Betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people who know your heart and choose to break it anyway. My legs trembled, not from age, but from the weight of this cruel revelation. The marble floors echoed as Daniel stepped closer, his voice firm but shaking slightly, as though he knew the cruelty he was committing. "You'll be better off in assisted living, Mom. You need help. You need structure." The lie burned hotter than fire. I didn't need assisted living. I needed my son to remember I was more than a burden. I was the woman who sacrificed everything to give him the life he enjoyed, including this mansion. The papers he shoved toward me blurred as tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wanted to scream, to ask him how he could do this, but my throat locked, strangled by grief. I glanced around the room one last time, my heart memorizing every detail. The family portraits on the wall, the scent of cedarwood from the polished staircase, the faint trace of my husband's cologne still lingering in the master suite upstairs. These walls had witnessed birthdays, Christmas mornings, and even funerals. They had held my laughter, my prayers, my deepest sorrows. And now, they would no longer hold me. I felt invisible, like a ghost being forced to leave her resting place. It wasn't just an eviction, it was an erasure of my existence. When I stepped out into the night air, my heart nearly stopped. Daniel closed the heavy oak door behind me without so much as a backward glance. The sound echoed like thunder, final and unforgiving. I stood on the front porch, clutching my shawl, my belongings stuffed into a single suitcase like I was some wandering beggar. The moonlight cast long shadows over the manicured lawns, and for the first time in my life, I felt utterly unwanted. My chest ached, not just from heartbreak but from a betrayal so profound it cut deeper than any blade. My neighbor's lights twinkled in the distance, but I couldn't bring myself to move. Where does a mother go when her own child has turned her into an exile? The cab ride to the small apartment I managed to rent with my savings was silent, except for the occasional sigh that escaped my lips. The driver glanced at me through the mirror, perhaps sensing my brokenness, but said nothing. I stared out the window, watching the city blur by, and thought of all the times I had held Daniel's tiny hands in mine, teaching him to cross these very streets. I remembered the nights when I went hungry so he could eat, the years I worked 2 jobs after his father died, and the dreams I tucked away so he could live his. And this was my repayment, discarded like an old coat left out for trash. The loneliness of that night sank into my bones. The first night in that dingy apartment was unbearable. The wallpaper peeled, the heater rattled like a dying breath, and the silence gnawed at me like rats in the dark. I sat on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, clutching my rosary in trembling hands. "Why, Lord?" I whispered into the stillness. "What did I do to deserve this?" My tears finally spilled, soaking the thin pillow. Sleep never came. I replayed every moment of Daniel's childhood, searching for the point where I had failed him. I thought of Marissa's sharp eyes and poisonous whispers, and my stomach twisted with rage. But deep beneath the rage, there was sorrow, a sorrow that felt like it might drown me entirely. Morning light crept through the dirty blinds, harsh and unforgiving. I forced myself to rise, though my body ached from the cold, from the weight of grief, from the cruel truth that I no longer had a home. My hands trembled as I brewed a weak cup of coffee, the bitter taste a cruel contrast to the warm breakfasts I used to make in the mansion's sunlit kitchen. The silence pressed on me, reminding me that I was truly alone now. My phone buzzed with a message, and when I opened it, I nearly dropped the device. It was Daniel. His words were frantic, desperate. "Mom, I need you. It's urgent. Please answer. It's life or death." My heart pounded as I read the message again and again, trying to make sense of it. Just 2 days ago, he had pushed me out of his life, out of my home, out of everything I knew. And now, he was begging me for help? The irony burned through my veins like fire, and for the first time in days, I felt something besides grief. I felt power. But what could possibly have happened in just 48 hours to bring my proud, heartless son to his knees? I set the phone down on the wobbly table, staring at it with a mix of fear, anger, and a spark of grim curiosity. As I sat there, torn between motherly instinct and the deep wound of betrayal, I realized this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. My son had taken my home, my dignity, and my peace, but now he was reaching back for something only I could give. The question burned inside me. Would I answer his plea, or let him taste the bitter loneliness he had forced on me? The choice was mine, and for the first time, I felt the scales tipping in my favor. This was only the beginning. Before we dive into what happens next, if this story has already touched you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, so you never miss the twists and turns still to come. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. Because what Daniel asked of me next will leave you speechless. When Daniel's message lit up my phone, my first instinct was to answer immediately. For 75 years, my life had been defined by caring for others, especially him. But my fingers hovered above the screen, frozen in hesitation. 2 days ago, he had tossed me aside like old furniture, and now he was calling me his lifeline. The irony was almost cruelly poetic. I poured myself another cup of weak coffee and sat quietly, staring at the chipped mug as though it might hold answers. Memories crept in, uninvited and relentless. Images of Daniel as a boy, curled in my lap after nightmares, begging me never to leave him. And yet, he left me. The betrayal still burned so raw that part of me wanted to let him taste desperation, the way I had tasted it standing on that porch with my suitcase. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and let the memories carry me decades back, to when Daniel was born. I was only 22, still reeling from the loss of my mother, when the doctor placed that tiny boy into my arms. His cries filled the hospital room, and I knew I would give him everything I had, even if it killed me. And in many ways, it did. His father, Richard, worked tirelessly in construction, while I picked up shifts as a school secretary and cleaned houses on weekends. Money was scarce, but love was plentiful. Daniel never went to bed hungry, never wore threadbare clothes. I gave him piano lessons we couldn't afford, saving pennies for months, just so he could have a chance at something beautiful. I thought about the nights when I stayed awake long after Richard had gone to bed, sewing patches into Daniel's jeans, making sure he looked presentable at school. I remember the joy in his eyes when he brought home his first A+ paper, the way he hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." It was worth every sacrifice. Even when Richard died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving me a widow at 45, I carried on. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep our home. The mansion didn't fall from the sky. It was Richard's dream, our dream, and I built it brick by brick after his death. Daniel grew up under that roof, spoiled with comforts I never had. To see him rip it away from me so coldly was a wound that may never heal. Marissa entered our lives when Daniel was 26, and from the first moment I met her, I knew trouble was coming. She had the kind of beauty that was practiced, deliberate, the sort of woman who measured her worth in diamonds and Instagram likes. She smiled politely, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. as though she were already plotting how to carve herself into Daniel's life and shove me out. "Your mom is sweet," she said once, the kind of compliment laced with dismissal. I noticed how Daniel's laughter changed around her, how his once warm, boyish laugh became clipped and performative, as though trying to impress. Slowly, my son slipped further from me, his mind tangled in her web. The mansion became theirs, not ours, and I was tolerated at best. The first time Marissa suggested I move into a retirement home, Daniel laughed it off. "She's not going anywhere," he said then, still holding some semblance of loyalty. But over the years, her whispers grew stronger, her influence bolder. I saw it in the way she looked at me across the dinner table, like I was a relic of the past taking up valuable space. By the time Daniel placed that eviction notice in my hands, his voice was no longer his own, it was hers. He thought he was saving me, but he was saving her. My son had become a stranger, molded by a woman who viewed family as obstacles to wealth and control. As I sat in my dingy apartment now, the memory of Marissa's smirk that night sent rage burning through my chest. Daniel's message buzzed again, more frantic this time. "Mom, please, I need you. It's urgent. I'm at the hospital. Call me." The hospital. My stomach dropped. I couldn't deny that part of me still loved him, fiercely and unconditionally, despite everything. That's the curse of motherhood. You can break a mother's heart 1,000 times, and it will still beat for you. But another part of me, the part that had stood alone in the freezing night outside the mansion, wondered if this was justice finally arriving. Maybe life had decided to show Daniel what it felt like to be desperate. Maybe it was my turn to watch him beg. I held the phone tightly, my thumb hovering over the call button. My chest ached with the weight of choice. This was not just about answering a phone. It was about deciding who I was now. Was I still the mother who would leap into fire for her son, even when he had burned me? Or was I the woman who had been discarded, who deserved to let him feel the cold sting of rejection? I thought about Richard, about how he used to tell me, "Don't let bitterness poison your heart, Ellie. Love, even when it hurts." But Richard never lived to see our son throw me out of our home. Would he still say the same if he had? My faith wavered, my heart torn in half. A knock at my apartment door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. With cautious steps, I opened it, and standing there was my neighbor, Mrs. Coleman, holding a basket of muffins. She was a kind woman, retired like me, always checking in. "I heard your phone buzzing all morning," she said with a gentle smile. "Everything all right, Eleanor?" I forced a smile, thanked her, and closed the door. But her words cut deeper than she knew. Everything all right? No, nothing was all right. My son had thrown me away, and now, for reasons I didn't understand yet, he wanted me back. My hands shook as I picked up the phone again. My reflection in the darkened screen looked like a stranger, old, tired, betrayed, but still searching for answers. I finally pressed the button and called him back. The line picked up immediately, and Daniel's voice came through, hoarse and frantic. "Mom, thank God. I'm at St. Mary's Hospital. Please, I need you here. It's about my kidneys, the doctors say." His words broke into sobs, the sound both alien and familiar. My son, the same son who had shut a door in my face, was crying for me now. My heart clenched, torn between anger and instinct. I whispered into the phone, my voice steady but trembling. "Daniel, after what you did to me, you better have one hell of a reason." His silence on the other end chilled me to the bone, and then he spoke 4 words that changed everything. "Mom, you're my match." Walking into St. Mary's Hospital felt like stepping into a dream I hadn't asked for. The sterile smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint aroma of burnt coffee made me nauseous. I clutched my old handbag tighter, my heart pounding with each step. When the nurse led me to Daniel's room, I paused outside the door, listening. His voice was low, broken, nothing like the commanding man who had ordered me out of my own house. "I need her," I heard him whisper. My chest tightened, hearing him vulnerable again after years of arrogance. I wanted to turn back, to vanish before he saw the hesitation on my face, but the nurse pushed the door open gently. And there he was, my son, pale, thinner than I remembered, tubes running from his arms. For a moment, I almost forgot the betrayal. Almost. Marissa was the first to notice me, and the look on her face was pure venom. She stood quickly, smoothing her expensive blouse, as if preparing for a confrontation. "Mrs. Hale," she said in that icy tone, not daring to call me Eleanor or Mom. "Thank you for coming." Her words dripped with insincerity, like I was a pawn she had managed to manipulate into position. Daniel's eyes lifted then, and when he saw me, tears welled. "Mom," he rasped, reaching out weakly. My heart clenched, but I didn't move. The sight of Marissa's hand resting possessively on his shoulder stopped me cold. That woman had whispered me out of my son's life, and now she wanted to pull me back only because they needed something from me. I sat down slowly in the chair by the bed, keeping my distance. My hands folded neatly in my lap to keep them from shaking. Daniel swallowed hard before speaking, his voice filled with desperation. "Mom, the doctors say I'm in stage 5 renal failure. My kidneys are shutting down. They tested Marissa. She isn't a match. But you are." His words hung in the air, heavy as lead. The room went silent except for the steady beep of the monitor. I stared at him, at my baby boy grown into a man who had once thrown me away like garbage. I wanted to cry, to scream, to hug him. But all I could do was ask, "And what happens after, Daniel? If I give you a piece of me, will I still be left standing outside my own home?" Marissa stiffened, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't the time for emotional blackmail," she snapped, her voice cutting through the tension. "Your son's life is on the line. You're his mother. Do the right thing." I turned slowly, locking eyes with her. "The right thing," I repeated, my voice shaking with both rage and grief. The right thing would have been convincing him not to throw his 75-year-old mother onto the streets. The right thing would have been making sure I had a bed when winter came. Don't lecture me about morality when you stood there smirking as I was evicted from my own home. Daniel flinched, tears rolling down his cheeks. Marissa bit her lip, but didn't apologize. The silence between us roared louder than the machines. Daniel reached out again, his hand trembling. "Mom, please. I know I was wrong. I can't change what happened, but I don't want to die. Not like this. I need you." His voice cracked on the last words, pulling at every maternal thread in me. My heart ached with the urge to forgive, to save him without question. But I also remembered the cold night, standing on the mansion's steps, Marissa's cruel words echoing. I thought of Richard, my late husband, of all the sacrifices I had made for this child who now only saw me as a resource. My silence stretched long, each second heavier than the last. The machines beeped steadily, a cruel reminder that time was running out for him. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "You want my kidney?" I asked slowly. "Then I need something in return. Not money, not comfort, respect. My dignity. My place in your life again." Daniel's eyes widened, and Marissa scoffed. "This is absurd," she said sharply. "You're bargaining while your son is dying?" I turned to her with steel in my voice. "No. I'm setting boundaries, something you've made sure I never had in his life. You think I'm here because you ordered it? No, Marissa. I came because despite everything, I still love my son. But love doesn't mean being a doormat. If Daniel wants me to save him, then I need assurance that I'll never be discarded again." For once, Marissa had no clever retort. The doctor entered then, breaking the tension. He explained the risks of the surgery, the recovery time, the possibility of complications. His words swirled in my head, but I caught the one truth that mattered. Without me, Daniel might not live another 6 months. 6 months. That was all. My son's life was tethered to me in a way I never imagined. Daniel's eyes met mine, pleading. "Please, Mom. I can't do this without you." I felt tears sting my eyes, the same tears I had swallowed so many times since that night on the porch. A storm of emotions crashed inside me. Betrayal, love, anger, hope. I didn't know whether to scream or to hold him. Instead, I whispered, "I'll think about it." Marissa exploded, her voice shrill. "Think about it. He doesn't have time for you to think. Do you even care if he dies?" Her words struck like daggers, but instead of bleeding, I felt a fire ignite within me. I stood slowly, my legs trembling but my resolve firm. "Don't you dare question my love for my son," I said, my voice shaking the room. "I've cared for him since the day he was born, through every scraped knee and sleepless night. You only showed up when he had money. Don't talk to me about care. You wouldn't know love if it stared you in the face." Daniel buried his face in his hands, sobbing, while Marissa glared at me, speechless for the first time since I had known her. As I turned to leave, Daniel's voice cracked behind me. "Mom, if you walk out now, I might not live to see tomorrow." I froze in the doorway, my back to him. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. Slowly, I turned my head and said softly, "Maybe tomorrow is what you should have thought about when you sent me into the cold." His sobs grew louder, filling the sterile room like a hymn of regret. The door clicked shut behind me as I walked into the hallway, the weight of my decision pressing heavily on my shoulders. My mind raced, torn between the instinct to protect and the desire to let him finally understand loss. I didn't know which side would win, but I knew one thing. The next choice I made would change both of our lives forever. I left the hospital with my head spinning, the cold night air biting at my cheeks as if to remind me that I was still alive while my son lay dying. I should have felt triumphant, finally holding the power after years of being treated like an afterthought. But instead, I felt sick. Every memory of Daniel as a boy came rushing back. The way he used to grip my hand tightly on his first day of school. The way he cried when his father worked late. The way he used to whisper, "Don't leave me, Mama," when storms shook the windows. And now here we were, decades later, with him begging again. But this time, it wasn't for comfort. It was for a piece of me I wasn't sure I was willing to give. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in the stiff bed of my sister Ruth's guest room, the springs groaning under every movement. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the old clock tick, each second hammering the urgency of Daniel's situation. Ruth had offered me shelter without hesitation, welcoming me with open arms when my own son had cast me aside. Now she padded softly into the room, carrying a cup of warm tea. "You're still awake," she said, setting the cup on the nightstand. I nodded, my throat tight. She sat beside me, brushing my thinning hair back like she used to when we were children. "You don't owe him your life," she whispered. Her words were firm, but her eyes were gentle. "After what he did, no one would blame you for walking away." But that was the problem. I blamed myself, even when others wouldn't. Daniel had been my world. I had sacrificed friendships, opportunities, even my own health at times to make sure he had the best life possible. And what had that led to? Him tossing me aside like yesterday's trash. Still, the maternal pull inside me was a beast I couldn't tame. "He's my son," I murmured. "What if I let him die, Ruth? What if tomorrow I wake up and he's gone because I couldn't forgive him in time?" Ruth's jaw tightened. "Then maybe he'll finally understand what you felt when he turned you away." Her words sliced through me like glass. Was this revenge? Was this justice? Or was this cruelty disguised as self-preservation? The next morning, I wandered into town to clear my head. Everywhere I went, the whispers followed me. At the grocery store, two women near the produce section lowered their voices, but I still caught the words. "That's her. Daniel Whitmore's mother. He kicked her out, and now he needs her kidney." Their eyes flicked to me, pity mixed with gossip. My cheeks burned, and I turned away quickly, but inside, I was trembling. The entire town knew. My pain, my humiliation, my son's desperation, it had all become public theater. And now, everyone was watching to see what choice I would make. I stopped by the church afterward, sitting quietly in the last pew, staring at the flickering candles. Father Henry, an old friend, noticed me and slid into the pew beside me. "You've got the look of someone carrying more than she should," he said softly. I chuckled bitterly. "That obvious?" He nodded, folding his hands. I told him everything. The eviction, the mansion, the hospital, Marissa's venom, Daniel's pleas. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, I asked the question that had been haunting me. "If I refuse, does that make me a bad mother?" He sighed deeply. "Eleanor, being a mother doesn't mean destroying yourself to save someone who destroyed you. Sometimes the greatest love is teaching a lesson only pain can deliver." I left the church more conflicted than ever. On one hand, I longed to protect Daniel, to give him another chance. On the other, I feared that saving him would mean validating every cruel choice he'd made. Would he truly change if I gave him what he wanted? Or would he heal, return to Marissa's side, and forget me again? That night, Ruth asked the question I had been dreading. "What if he dies? Could you live with that?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, no, I couldn't. I would carry that weight until my last breath. But I also couldn't live with being disposable again. My soul felt torn in two, the pieces cutting deeper the longer I hesitated. By the second day, the hospital called me. The doctor's voice was professional but urgent. "Mrs. Whitmore, your son's condition is deteriorating quickly. We need a decision. He doesn't have much time." I promised I'd be there soon, but when I hung up, I didn't move. I sat frozen on Ruth's couch, staring at the family photo albums she'd left open on the table. Pictures of us as children, of my wedding day, of Daniel's first steps. His small face beamed up at me from a photograph, his toothless grin radiating innocence. How could that sweet boy have grown into the man who exiled me from my home? And yet, how could I deny that same boy, now trapped in the body of a desperate man, the chance to live? As I stood, preparing to go back to the hospital, Ruth caught my hand. "Eleanor, if you decide to do this, do it for yourself. Not for him, not for Marissa, not for what people will say. Do it because you want to, because it's your choice. That way, no matter the outcome, you won't regret it." I squeezed her hand, tears stinging my eyes. For the first time, I realized this decision wasn't about Daniel's redemption. It was about mine. I had to decide whether my love for my son outweighed the pain he had caused me. And that choice was mine alone to carry. I arrived at the hospital just before sunset. The halls were quieter now, the hum of machines echoing faintly as I made my way to his room. Daniel was asleep, his face pale, his body frail, a shadow of the son I once knew. Marissa sat in the corner, scrolling on her phone, her expression annoyed rather than worried. She barely looked up as I entered, but Daniel stirred, his eyes fluttering open. When he saw me, his lips parted in a weak smile. "Mom," he whispered, his voice fragile as glass. I moved closer, my heart breaking at the sight of him so diminished. And then, before I could speak, he rasped, "Did you come to save me?" His question hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Instead, the room filled with the deafening silence of a choice not yet made. A silence that felt heavier than any answer could. I stood at Daniel's bedside, his question burning into my soul. "Did you come to save me?" The words rattled around in my head, echoing louder with every second of silence that followed. His frail body looked nothing like the man who had once towered over me, declaring that the mansion was his and that I was no longer welcome there. Instead, he looked like a scared little boy again, clinging to life as though my answer determined his fate. My lips trembled, and I finally whispered, "I came to see if you were worth saving." His eyes widened, hurt flickering across his face, but I didn't flinch. For once, I wasn't going to hand him everything without making him earn it. The balance of power had shifted, and he knew it. The room went still. Marissa set down her phone at last, her eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" she hissed. I ignored her, keeping my gaze locked on Daniel. His lips parted, but no words came. Finally, he croaked. "Mom, I was wrong. I should never have put you out. I was stupid." He swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. I thought the house, the money, all of it, meant more than anything. But lying here, I see what matters. I see you. His voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, I wanted to believe him. But years of disappointment had built walls around my heart, and I wasn't about to let a single plea tear them down. I leaned closer, my voice low. "If I give you this kidney, Daniel, what happens next? Do you and Marissa throw me back out the moment you recover? Do you forget me again until you need something else? Or will you finally remember the woman who raised you when no one else would?" His face flushed with shame, but before he could answer, Marissa cut in. "This isn't about your feelings, Eleanor. This is about saving his life. If you're too selfish to see that, maybe you don't deserve to be called his mother." Her venom stung, but I stood my ground. I turned to her, my voice sharp. "And maybe you don't deserve to call yourself his wife if you can't respect the woman who made him who he is." For once, Marissa fell silent, her glare smoldering in the shadows. Daniel coughed weakly, reaching out a trembling hand. I hesitated before taking it, the warmth of his skin fragile but real. "Please, Mom," he whispered. "I know I've hurt you. I can't change the past, but I can try to make it right. Just give me the chance." His words twisted in my chest. I wanted so badly to believe him, to let the years of betrayal dissolve with a single act of mercy. But trust wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a garden that had been burned to ash, and I wasn't sure if anything could grow there again. Still, his desperation was real, and it pierced the cracks in my armor. For the first time, I saw not just my son, but a man stripped of pride, begging for forgiveness he might not deserve. I pulled my hand back slowly, folding it in my lap. "You say you'll change. Then prove it," I said firmly. Daniel's brow furrowed in confusion. "How?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling strength surge through me. "Start by telling the truth. Admit what you did, not just to me, but to everyone who knows. You threw your own mother out of her home. You let your wife talk to me like I was dirt. If you want me to risk my life for you, then you risk your pride. Own your sins, Daniel." His lips trembled, fear flashing in his eyes. For a man like him, humiliation was a fate worse than death. And yet, if he couldn't face that, how could I believe his promises? The silence stretched until Marissa snapped. "This is ridiculous. He doesn't need a confession. He needs surgery." Her voice rose, attracting a passing nurse who peered in before moving on. I stood, turning toward her with all the fire in my chest. "No, what he needs is accountability. I've spent 75 years carrying everyone else's burdens while no one carried mine. If he wants my kidney, he has to prove he's worth it." Marissa scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're cruel. Heartless." I stared at her, my voice calm but unyielding. "No. For the first time in my life, I'm being honest." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between us. Finally, he whispered, "I'll do it." My breath caught. "You'll do what?" I asked, hardly trusting my ears. "I'll admit it," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "I'll tell everyone what I did. I'll apologize. Whatever it takes. Just, please don't let me die." For a moment, the room tilted, the weight of his words pressing against my chest. I searched his face for lies, for manipulation, for the son who had once used my love as a weapon against me. But all I saw was fear and regret. Raw, unpolished, maybe even real. Still, doubt gnawed at me. Could a man who had turned his mother into a beggar truly change in the face of death? Or was this just another desperate performance, one last act to secure his survival? I sank back into the chair, my heart pounding. "We'll see," I whispered, my decision still unfinished but the path becoming clearer. Daniel closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him under, while Marissa fumed silently in her corner. I sat there, torn between love and resentment, duty and self-preservation. Outside the window, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a dim, haunting glow. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see which way I would fall. And as the machines beeped steadily beside him, I realized something terrifying. Whether I saved him or not, nothing would ever be the same. The son I had raised was gone, and in his place was a man begging for mercy. The question was, did I have enough left inside me to give it? Or was this the moment I finally let him face the consequences of his choices? The answer lingered in the silence, heavy and unforgiving, as the night closed in. The next morning, I woke to the shrill ring of the hospital phone in my room. A nurse leaned in, her eyes cautious. "Mrs. Hale, your son has asked to speak publicly. He says it's important." My heart quickened. This was it, the moment I had demanded. The proof that he was willing to crawl out of his pride and face the shame he had buried. I rose slowly, my bones aching, but my mind sharper than it had been in years. By the time I arrived in the conference room, a small crowd had gathered. Doctors, a few family friends, and even members of our church. Daniel sat in a wheelchair at the front, pale and trembling, yet somehow composed. For a split second, I wondered if he had the courage. Then his eyes met mine, and I saw the fear that meant he might actually do it. He cleared his throat, his voice hoarse but steady enough to carry. "I asked you all here because I need to confess." The room quieted, every gaze fixed on him. He hesitated, swallowing hard, then continued. 2 weeks ago, I did something unforgivable. I forced my own mother, my 75-year-old mother, out of her home. The home she built, the home she kept alive after my father passed. I told her she wasn't welcome, that she was a burden. I chose money, property, and pride over the woman who gave me life. Gasps echoed from the crowd. Daniel shifted, his hands shaking as he gripped the armrests of his chair. His voice cracked. "And now, I'm paying for it. Not because I lost the house, but because I lost her trust. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need to say it, even if it ruins me." Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper into his own chest. For years, Daniel had worn arrogance like armor, strutting through life as though invincible. Now, stripped bare, he looked like a child finally facing his reflection. Marissa stood stiffly in the corner, arms crossed, her lips pressed so tightly they looked bloodless. I watched her carefully. This wasn't her plan. She wanted me to hand over my kidney quietly, without conditions, without exposing the truth. And now, Daniel's confession was peeling away the mask they had both worn for so long. "I humiliated the woman who sacrificed everything for me," Daniel continued, his voice breaking. "And in my arrogance, I thought I'd never pay for it. But God doesn't let things slide forever." The room was still. A woman from our church dabbed her eyes with a tissue. One of Daniel's colleagues shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet his gaze. And me. My heart ached, torn between sorrow and vindication. I had demanded this moment, but I hadn't prepared myself for how raw it would feel. Watching my son humiliate himself, admit to the world what he had done to me, it didn't bring me triumph. It brought me grief, for all the years wasted, for the distance pride had carved between us. "I don't know if my mother will forgive me," Daniel said, his eyes shining with tears. "But I need her to know that I see her now. I see what I did, and I'll never run from it again." His voice faltered, and silence blanketed the room. All eyes turned toward me. The weight of expectation pressed down, urging me to respond. My throat tightened, my pulse racing as I stepped forward. I looked at him, my son, broken but trying, and I wanted to believe him. "You say you see me now," I whispered, my voice trembling. "But I've been here all along, Daniel. You only looked away." His eyes closed, tears spilling down his cheeks. The room seemed to shrink, trapping us in the gravity of decades of pain and unspoken words. I wanted to take him in my arms, but I also wanted to scream, to demand why it had taken a death sentence to wake him up. A cough broke the tension. Marissa stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "This is a spectacle," she spat. "He doesn't need a circus. He needs surgery. Eleanor, are you satisfied? You've dragged his name through the mud in front of everyone. Are you happy now?" Her words stung, but not because they were true, because they revealed her fear. She thrived on secrecy, manipulation, and image. Daniel's confession had shattered that carefully curated illusion. "Happy?" I repeated softly, shaking my head. "No. There's no happiness in this. Only truth. And if truth feels like mud to you, Marissa, maybe you've been living in dirt all along." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Marissa's face contorted with rage. Daniel lifted a trembling hand, motioning for silence. "Stop," he whispered. "This isn't about her. It's about me. And my mother." He turned toward me again, his expression raw and unguarded. "I can't undo what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel unwanted again. That's all I have left to offer you, Mom. My word." My knees wobbled beneath me. I wanted so badly to trust him, to believe that this was more than desperation. But deep inside, a question gnawed at me. If he lived, would this promise fade like smoke once comfort returned? Could a man who once cast me aside truly transform overnight? The crowd leaned forward, waiting for my answer, but I couldn't give it. Not yet. My silence spoke louder than words. Daniel's face crumpled, but he nodded, as though accepting my hesitation. For the first time in years, he wasn't demanding. He was waiting. As the room cleared, whispers followed us like shadows. Some pitied him, others pitied me. I walked slowly, my body heavy, but my spirit strangely lighter. The truth was out. The world knew what he had done. For once, I wasn't the silent, humiliated mother in the background. My voice, my pain, had been heard. But now, a new burden weighed on me. Choice. Could I risk my life for a son who had risked nothing for me until now? Or was this confession enough proof that he had finally turned the corner? I lay awake that night, the hospital walls cold and unwelcoming, my mind circling the same question. Mercy or justice? By morning, I still had no answer. The doctor knocked gently on my door, his voice low. "Mrs. Hale, we'll need your decision soon. Time is running out." I closed my eyes, my hands trembling in my lap. Mercy or justice? My son's life or his lesson? The words looped endlessly, a torment I couldn't escape. And as the clock ticked louder in my ears, I knew one thing with certainty. Whatever choice I made, none of us would leave this unscarred. The next day dawned grey, the kind of sky that seemed to press down on your chest. I sat in the hospital garden, wrapped in a blanket the nurses had draped over my shoulders. Daniel wheeled himself out to me, his face pale but his eyes searching mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. "Words are easy, Daniel. Anyone can cry in front of an audience and call it a confession. But actions cost something." He nodded, his jaw tightening. "What do you want me to do, Mom? Just tell me." I studied him, wondering if he really meant it. For so long, he'd treated responsibility like poison. But if he was going to earn even a chance at my forgiveness, he would have to face the weight of what he'd done, not just to me, but to everyone he'd pushed aside chasing power. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "If you're serious, then you'll prove it. Start by making things right with the people you hurt. Your sister hasn't spoken to you in months. You fired half the staff without a second thought. You drove your father's best friend out of the company. If you want me to believe you've changed, go to them. Apologize. Not because you need something, but because it's right." His face drained of color, but he didn't argue. That silence told me more than any speech could. "Mom, I don't have much time," he whispered. "Then don't waste it," I replied, my voice sharp. "If you want me to save your life, show me you're willing to live it differently." He dropped his gaze, nodding slowly. I could see the war raging inside him, ego against desperation. For once, desperation seemed to win. By that afternoon, he began. The first call was to his sister, Valerie. I sat nearby as he dialed, my arms crossed, listening. When her voice crackled through the line, sharp and guarded, he flinched. "Val, it's me." Silence. Then, coldly, "What do you want?" He swallowed hard. "I want to say I was wrong. I pushed you away, mocked your choices, and treated you like you were nothing. You didn't deserve that. I was jealous, petty, and cruel." For a moment, I thought she would hang up. But then her voice broke, brittle but still strong. "You don't get to just say sorry and fix it, Daniel. You broke us." His hands shook, tears brimming. "I know," he whispered. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I had to tell you I see it now." When the call ended, his shoulders sagged. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. The next day, he insisted on seeing Mr. Latham, my late husband's friend who had once been like family. Daniel had forced him out of the company during a power grab years ago. When Mr. Latham entered the hospital room, his expression was stone. "You look worse than the rumors," he said flatly. Daniel bowed his head. "I deserve that. And worse." He struggled to speak, his voice breaking. "I betrayed my father's legacy and pushed you aside when you were the only one who ever tried to guide me. I don't deserve your respect, but I want you to know I regret it." Mr. Latham's lips tightened, his eyes glassy. "Regret doesn't erase the damage," he muttered. "But maybe it's a start." For the first time, I saw humility in my son's posture. It wasn't an act. It was raw, uncomfortable, and real. Each apology chipped away at him, leaving him smaller but somehow lighter. By the third day, he was physically weaker but spiritually different. Even the nurses noticed the change. One leaned over to me in the hallway and whispered, "He says thank you now. And please. He looks people in the eye." I nodded, though my heart was still heavy. I wanted to believe this transformation, but I'd been burned by false promises before. And yet, there was something undeniable about his effort. He wasn't just saying what I wanted to hear. He was reaching out to people he had no reason to, people who couldn't help him. That was the test I had set, and he was passing it. Still, the hardest part was yet to come. Could he confront the one truth he had never admitted, the one wound we both carried? On the fourth day, I asked him to face it. "You've apologized to them," I said, my eyes locking onto his. "Now it's time to apologize to me. But not for the eviction. For the years before that. For the way you treated me like I was invisible." His throat tightened, his eyes darting away. "Mom," he began, but I raised a hand. "Don't stall. Say it." Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered, "I made you feel unwanted, like you were nothing more than a weight on my life. And you were the one person who never left me. You gave up everything for me, and I repaid you with contempt. I knew it hurt you, but I pretended it didn't matter. Because if I admitted it mattered, I would have had to face what a terrible son I was." His voice broke, his body trembling. I felt the words cut deep, reopening wounds I'd buried. But there was power in hearing them aloud, in forcing him to admit the truth he'd avoided his entire life. For the first time, I saw not the arrogant man who had thrown me out, but the little boy who had once clung to me after nightmares, begging me never to leave. "Do you mean it?" I whispered. His head snapped up, eyes wide with desperation. "Yes, Mom. With everything I have left." A long silence stretched between us. My heart ached with both love and fury. Could I forgive him? Could I risk everything to save him? Before I could answer, the doctor entered, his face grave. "Mrs. Hale, we're out of time. If you're going to move forward with the surgery, it has to be now." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Daniel's lips parted, but no sound came out. His face turned ashen, fear and hope warring in his eyes. The decision I had dreaded for days had finally cornered me. Mercy or justice? Love or survival? My breath hitched as I looked at him, this fragile, broken man who had once been my pride and then my deepest shame. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Please." My body shook with the weight of it all. For 75 years, I had carried burdens, sacrifices, betrayals, and now, this choice. My eyes burned as I stared at him, and I knew whatever I said next would change both of our lives forever. But before the words left my lips, I felt the world tilt, as though destiny itself was watching. I leaned forward, my hand trembling as I reached for his. "If I do this, Daniel," I said slowly, my voice raw, "it won't be because you begged. It will be because I believe you've finally remembered who you are. And if I give you this chance, you had better live a life that honors it. Do you understand?" His sobs came uncontrollably, his head nodding furiously. I sat back, my body collapsing under the weight of the choice I was about to make. And though the doctor's eyes urged me to decide, I wasn't ready. Not yet. My silence left the answer dangling in the air, and with it, the cliffhanger of our story. Would I choose mercy or justice? The night before the surgery decision, I lay awake in the narrow hospital bed, my thoughts a storm that refused to quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly, mocking me with their consistency when everything in my heart felt chaotic. At 75 years old, I thought I'd seen every shade of betrayal and forgiveness. But this was something else entirely. I could give life again to the boy who had broken me, or I could refuse and let nature take its course. A mother's instinct screamed one way, but the woman he'd wronged demanded justice. My pulse raced as I stared at the ceiling. No one could make this choice for me. Daniel's apologies replayed in my head, his trembling voice, his tear-stained face. But could I truly trust that desperation had transformed him? Or would saving him only return me to the cycle of hurt I'd endured for years? When dawn broke, the golden light spilled through the blinds, cutting across the hospital floor. A nurse came in with my breakfast tray, but I barely touched it. My hands trembled as I held the coffee cup, steam curling upward like a spirit leaving a body. Across the hall, I could hear Daniel's cough, weak and hollow. Each sound pierced me like a dagger. I had carried him in my womb, held him through fevers, and fed him when he was too small to feed himself. Now I was the only one standing between him and death. And yet, wasn't he the same man who had turned me out of my own home, leaving me to sleep in a stranger's guest room while he redecorated the mansion with cold marble and gold accents? I shook my head. Love and bitterness warred inside me, twisting my stomach into knots. Later that morning, Valerie, my daughter, arrived. She stood at the foot of my bed, her face set in quiet fury. "You can't do it, Mom," she said firmly, arms crossed. "Not after everything he did to you. He doesn't deserve your kidney." Her voice cracked with emotion, though she tried to keep it steady. I stared at her, my lips trembling. "Valerie, he's still my son." She leaned closer, her eyes burning into mine. "And you're still my mother. I've watched him humiliate you for years. He stole your home, your dignity, your peace. If you save him now, what message does that send? That he can do whatever he wants and you'll always be there to rescue him." Her words stabbed at me. She wasn't wrong. Daniel's pattern had always been to fall into disaster and expect others to clean it up. But could a mother ever stop being a mother? That was the torment tearing me apart. When Daniel wheeled himself into my room that afternoon, his face pale but determined, I noticed something different. He held a notebook in his lap, its cover worn and creased. "What's this?" I asked cautiously. He looked me in the eyes. "I've been writing letters. To the people I hurt. To Valerie. To Mr. Latham. To the staff I fired. And one to you." My chest tightened as he opened the notebook, his voice unsteady. "Dear Mom," he began, "if I could go back and undo every cruel word, every selfish decision, I would. You gave me life once, and I squandered it. If you choose not to save me, I want you to know I don't blame you. You owe me nothing. But if you do, if you give me this chance, I will live the rest of my days honoring you, not dishonoring you." His voice cracked. I turned away, tears burning my eyes. That night, I found myself clutching the notebook, rereading his words under the dim hospital light. For years, I had longed for Daniel to recognize the pain he caused, to see me not as an obstacle but as a person, a mother with feelings, sacrifices, and wounds. His letter had given me that, something I'd thought I'd never receive. And yet, even as I cried softly into the pages, I couldn't shake Valerie's words. He doesn't deserve it. My heart twisted with the cruelest question a mother could face. Was it my duty to save my son, or was it my duty to teach him the hardest lesson of all? As midnight crept in, I prayed for a sign. Something, anything, that would point me to the right choice. Because I knew, once the sun rose, the doctors would expect my answer. And once I gave it, there would be no turning back. The following morning, the sign arrived, though not in the way I expected. A doctor entered my room with a grim look. "Mrs. Hale," he said carefully, "we've run further tests. There's a complication. Your kidney is a match, but your age makes the surgery extremely high risk. There's a chance you might not survive." My body went cold. Risking my life wasn't something I had truly considered. I thought of my granddaughter, Valerie's little girl, who clung to me when I read bedtime stories. I thought of the garden I had dreamed of planting at the retirement home, the friends I might still make, the years I could still live. Was I willing to gamble all that for Daniel? He looked at me, panic flooding his face. "No, Mom," he whispered. "I can't let you do this if it means losing you." But his words only made the decision harder. As the hours passed, I found myself at war again, but this time the stakes felt heavier. If I refused, Daniel would likely die, and I would live with the image of his broken body burned into my memory. If I agreed, I might die on the operating table, leaving Valerie motherless, leaving my granddaughter without a grandmother. My entire life had been about sacrifice, working 2 jobs after my husband died, going without so my children could have more, enduring humiliation in silence. Was this one last sacrifice, or was it finally time to choose myself? My heart pounded with the weight of it all. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the hospital window in silver lines. It felt as though the world itself was crying with me, urging me to choose wisely, knowing either path would leave scars. By evening, the family gathered in my room. Valerie stood on one side, Daniel on the other, the air between them thick with unspoken rage. "Mom, you can't risk your life for him," Valerie pleaded, her voice breaking. "I need you. My daughter needs you." Daniel's eyes glistened as he whispered, "I need her too." The nurse tried to calm the tension, but the room pulsed with emotion. For the first time in years, I saw my children together, both reaching for me in different ways. And in that moment, I realized something profound. No matter what choice I made, I could not save them both. One would gain, and one would lose. And I, the woman torn between them, would carry the burden forever. I closed my eyes, my heart racing. The doctor entered quietly. "It's time, Mrs. Hale. We need your answer now." I opened my eyes and looked at Daniel. His lips trembled, his face etched with fear. Then I looked at Valerie, her eyes wide with desperation, silently begging me not to risk everything. My chest rose and fell as I inhaled deeply, summoning strength from the deepest parts of myself. "I will give you my answer," I said softly, my voice steady though my body shook. Both of them leaned in, waiting, the tension so thick it nearly suffocated me. And just as I parted my lips to speak, the monitor in Daniel's room across the hall began to shriek. Doctors rushed in, shouting orders. I was frozen in place as chaos erupted around me. Daniel's body was failing faster than anyone predicted. My choice was ripped from me, spiraling into urgency. And in that terrifying moment, I realized fate might decide for me before I ever could. The sound of Daniel's heart monitor wailing tore through me like a blade. I scrambled from my bed, dragging my forced stand as nurses rushed past, their voices sharp with urgency. "We're losing him," one of them shouted, and I froze in the doorway of his room, unable to breathe. His body jerked as they pressed the defibrillator paddles against his chest. The sight seared into my mind. My son, pale and lifeless, teetering between this world and the next. Tears blurred my vision as the machine delivered a shock. His body jolted, then slumped again. "Come back, Daniel," I whispered, clutching the doorframe. "Don't you dare leave like this." For years I had begged for his respect, his love, his acknowledgement. Now, as death threatened to rip him away, I begged for something far simpler. For him to just stay alive long enough for me to decide. Minutes felt like hours as the medical team fought to revive him. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Then, suddenly, the flat line on the monitor flickered. A faint pulse returned. Relief crashed over me, leaving me trembling and weak. The doctor barked more orders, stabilizing him, but I knew in that moment that time had run out. He was slipping through my fingers faster than I could cling to him. Valerie appeared at my side, gripping my arm tightly. "Mom, this is your sign," she said, her voice fierce but breaking. "Let him go. You don't need to kill yourself for him. Let nature do what it's doing." Her words stabbed me, but before I could reply, a nurse rushed over. "Mrs. Hale, we need your consent immediately if you're going through with the transplant. It's now or never." My knees buckled beneath the weight of that ultimatum. The room spun as I was wheeled back into my own bed. My mind screamed with competing voices. Valerie's plea for me to protect myself, Daniel's letter begging forgiveness, the doctor's warning about my survival, the memory of my husband urging me to always protect our children. The storm inside me was unbearable. When the doctor entered again, clipboard in hand, his expression grim, I knew it was time. "Mrs. Hale," he said quietly, "if we operate now, there's a chance, slim but real, that we can save him. But we must act immediately." His eyes softened. "I need your answer." My lips trembled, my heart pounding like a drum. All the years of pain, sacrifice, and betrayal flashed before me in rapid succession. Was my final chapter meant to be defined by mercy, or by justice? Slowly, I reached for the pen, my hand shaking so badly that the clipboard rattled. "Wait," Valerie cried, stepping between me and the doctor. "Mom, please. Think about yourself for once in your life. You've sacrificed everything already. If you die, what about me? What about my daughter? We need you." Her tears spilled freely as she grabbed my hands, her grip desperate. I looked at her, seeing not just my daughter but the child I had once rocked to sleep, the young woman I had comforted after heartbreak, the mother she had become. She was right. I was her anchor, her last parent, her strength. Yet when I turned my head and looked at Daniel, frail and broken in the bed across the hall, I saw another truth. He was still my son, my flesh, my blood. "I can't choose," I whispered hoarsely. "I can't choose between my children." The doctor's voice cut in, firm and unyielding. "You must. Right now." Something in me snapped. I stood, unsteady but determined, and pushed the clipboard back toward the doctor. "If he dies without me trying," I said, my voice shaking but strong, "I'll carry that guilt until my last breath. I won't let my child leave this earth thinking I abandoned him." Valerie sobbed, shaking her head violently, but I pressed on. "This is my choice, not yours." The doctor nodded, immediately signaling his team. Within seconds, the room was a blur of movement. Masks being fitted, IVs adjusted, surgical scrubs snapping into place. Daniel was prepped beside me, our gurneys lined up in parallel. As they wheeled us toward the operating room, I reached for his hand. His fingers twitched weakly, curling around mine. Tears filled my eyes. "Hold on, Daniel," I whispered. "I'm coming with you. One way or another, we'll finish this together." My heart pounded, knowing I might never come back. The operating room was freezing, sterile, lit by harsh white lights that made everything feel surreal. The anesthesiologist hovered above me, his masked face calm, almost detached. "Count backward from 10, he instructed as he fitted the mask over my mouth and nose. My vision blurred as the sedative coursed through my veins. I turned my head to catch one last glimpse of Daniel on the adjacent table. His chest rose and fell faintly, machines keeping him tethered to life. 10, 9, 8. My voice trailed off, heavy with sleep. But deep in my fading consciousness, a prayer formed. Lord, let my sacrifice mean something. Let him live to change. Darkness swallowed me whole, carrying me into a dreamless abyss where time no longer existed, where the only thing I felt was the weight of love and fear pressing against my chest. When I opened my eyes again, the world was blurred, voices muffled. Pain surged through my side, sharp and relentless. I tried to move but groaned instead. Slowly, the haze cleared. A nurse leaned over me, her voice soft. "Mrs. Hale, you're awake." The surgery. It was successful. Relief surged, though it was tangled with exhaustion. "Daniel," I croaked, my throat raw. The nurse smiled faintly. "He's stable. The kidney took. He's alive." Tears filled my eyes as I sank back against the pillows. For a moment, I felt peace. Fragile, fleeting, but real. Then Valerie entered the room, her expression torn between anger and relief. "You could have died," she whispered, clutching my hand. "But you didn't," I said softly, smiling weakly. "And neither did he." She shook her head, crying into my shoulder. I held her gently, knowing this choice would shape the rest of our lives, for better or worse. Hours later, they wheeled Daniel into my room. He was pale, weak, but alive. His eyes fluttered open, finding mine. "Mom!" His voice was hoarse, trembling. I forced a smile despite the pain. "You're here, Daniel. That's all that matters." Tears slid down his cheeks as he whispered. "You saved me. After everything. You still saved me." I reached for his hand, squeezing it with what little strength I had. "Don't waste this chance," I said firmly, my voice breaking. "Don't make me regret giving you life a second time." He nodded weakly, fresh tears spilling. For the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes I thought had died long ago. Gratitude, humility, perhaps even love. My chest ached with both relief and fear. Because while I had given him another chance, only time would reveal if he was worthy of it. That night, as I lay awake, the silence of the hospital pressed in around me. My body was racked with pain, but my soul was restless for another reason. I had risked everything. My life, my daughter's trust, my granddaughter's future, on the hope that Daniel would change. The weight of that gamble settled heavily on me. In the darkness, I whispered a prayer. "God, don't let this be in vain." Across the room, Daniel slept, machines beeping steadily. He was alive because of me, but whether he would stay alive in the ways that truly mattered, morally, spiritually, remained to be seen. I closed my eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring consequences I couldn't yet imagine. Forgiveness was a gift I had given freely. Redemption, however, was his burden to carry. And in my heart, I wondered if he was strong enough to bear it. Before I begin, if this story has moved you even a little, I ask you to gently pause and tap like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like this. Your support helps keep stories like mine alive. Now, let me tell you how it all ended. The days after the surgery blurred together. Nurses came and went, adjusting IVs, checking vitals, whispering updates. I drifted between sleep and pain, my body weak from the sacrifice. Yet every time I opened my eyes, Daniel was there. At first, he could barely speak. His voice was faint, his face gaunt. But he looked at me in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy, with gratitude that seemed almost childlike. It was strange, tender, and unsettling all at once. Valerie, however, struggled. She rarely spoke to Daniel, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. One morning, she pulled a chair close to my bed, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mom, I don't understand you," she whispered. "He evicted you. He threw you out like trash. And you risked your life for him. I sighed, my frail hand reaching for hers. Because he's my son, I said softly. Even broken things deserve a chance to be mended. Tears spilled from her eyes as she shook her head. Daniel overheard. His chest heaved, tears forming in his own eyes. Valerie, he croaked, his voice trembling. I know I don't deserve this. I know I don't deserve her. But I swear to you, I'll never forget it. I'll change. I'll be better. Valerie's glare softened but did not fade. You better, she snapped. Because if you break her heart again, I'll never forgive you. She stormed out, and Daniel turned back to me, his expression hollow. I ruined everything, Mom. But you gave me another chance. I won't waste it. His words hung heavy in the room, fragile promises that only time could test. Weeks passed. Rehabilitation was brutal, but we both endured it side by side. I learned to walk again with stitches tugging at my side. Daniel regained color in his cheeks, slowly climbing back from the edge of death. Valerie brought my granddaughter to visit. The little girl tiptoed into the room, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Grandma, are you okay? She asked, her big eyes wide with worry. I smiled, pulling her close. I'm stronger than ever, I whispered. In that moment, surrounded by generations of my family, I felt the weight of my decision settle. Not as regret, but as a legacy of love, even if it was painful. Daniel's recovery brought more than just health. It brought reflection. One afternoon, as the sun painted golden streaks across the hospital walls, he confessed, Mom, I lost myself chasing money, pride, and power. I thought that mansion made me a man. But it took losing everything, even you, to realize what truly matters. I don't want to live like that anymore. His voice cracked, tears spilling down his face. I want to earn back your love. Not through words, but through actions. My heart swelled with both hope and doubt. Then prove it, Daniel, I whispered. Every single day. And he tried. When I was discharged, Daniel insisted on taking me back. Not to the mansion, but to a smaller home he had rented for me. No more palaces, he said quietly. Just a place where you feel safe, loved, and respected. The gesture stunned me. He helped me unpack, cooked my meals, even sat through church services with me when his strength returned. For the first time in years, I saw glimpses of the boy I once knew. The one who used to run into my arms after school. The one who laughed so hard his stomach hurt. It was fragile, yes, but it was real. Still, I kept my guard. Late at night, lying in my bed, I replayed everything. His cruelty, his betrayal, his eviction. Forgiveness was not a switch to be flipped. It was a road, long and winding, filled with cracks and cliffs. Sometimes I wanted to hate him again, to remind myself of the pain. But then I'd see him gently helping his niece with her homework, or hear him whispering apologies when he thought I was asleep, and my heart softened despite itself. Healing, I realized, was not just for him. It was for me too. Months later, on my 76th birthday, my family gathered in my little home. Valerie brought cake, her laughter filling the room. My granddaughter sang, her sweet voice carrying innocence and joy. Daniel stood awkwardly with balloons, clearly unsure of himself but trying. When we all sat around the table, he raised a trembling glass of water. To my mother, he said, the woman who gave me life twice. I don't deserve you, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the son you can be proud of. My eyes welled with tears as I whispered, that's all I ever wanted. As the candles flickered and laughter echoed, I felt peace for the first time in years. Life had scarred me, broken me, tested me beyond measure. But in my sacrifice, I had found a strange kind of victory. I had taught my children the hardest lesson of all, that love is both fragile and indestructible. That forgiveness does not erase pain but reshapes it into strength. That even in betrayal, there is room for redemption. And as I looked at Daniel, Valerie, and my granddaughter, I knew that my story was not one of tragedy, but of triumph. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to gently like, share, and subscribe. Every voice, every listener, Every supporter keeps stories like mine alive. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. And remember, sometimes the greatest revenge is not hate, but the power to love when the world expects you to break.